Welcome to episode 6.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
Are you ready to plan your next vacation getaway? Then I recommend using 3D Travel Company. They are more powerful than pixie dust, more fantastic than flu powder, and they never charge a fee. Whether you're booking a Disney or Universal vacation, a relaxing cruise, or a luxury trip overseas, you'll experience concierge-level service unmatched by any agency. From the moment you submit a complimentary quote request or inquiry on their website at www.3dtravelcompany.com, you'll find out what it means to be pampered by the best in the business. That's 3, the letter D, travelcompany.com. And tell them Trenton sent you.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Today on the show we have Bob Bergen. He is the voice of Porky Pig from Looney Tunes and Tiny Toon Adventures.
At first they told me to lose the stutter. Now they tell me I'm not funny. It's a pain in the butt being politically correct.
He has also starred in Star Wars The Clone Wars, the animated series, as Lama Su from the cloning facilities on Kamino.
Greetings, Generals.
I wish our arrival wasn't under such circumstances. We believe Grievous is planning a separatist attack on Kamino.
But the Republic blockade is far too strong. They would not dare.
Another exciting role Bob got to play was the Winter Soldier on Avengers Assemble.
This is Winter Soldier. The blood of the Hulk is in my possession. Proceeding with Phase 2.
And another well-known character he got to play was Luke Skywalker on Rogue Squadron 1, 2, and 3, and these are just a few of the games he got to play Luke Skywalker on.
Good morning, Wedge. The rest of Rogue Squadron is still back at base, but I thought we could take an early morning run through Beggar's Canyon.
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show, we have our distinguished... I can't talk today.
You know what? When it comes to voiceover, just fake it. You know, when I have a problem saying something, I just stutter it.
Well, Bob, the first thing we always like to do when we have a guest on the show is just get a background of who they are as an individual, maybe from when you grew up to where you are now, and how did you get into voiceover? What kind of led you down that path?
Well, it was, something I always wanted to do. When I was a kid, I wanted to do voices for cartoons, but I grew up in the Midwest where there really weren't that many opportunities. The closest I had was the little portable tape recorder that Grandma gave me when I was a kid, and I would tape cartoons and tape me doing cartoons and things like that. So when I was 14, my dad announced that he's moving the family to L.A. because he took a job in L.A., and I thought, well, this is great, because that's where cartoons are made and recorded, and I knew I needed to be there. So the day after Dad moved here, I just picked up the telephone, and I started making phone calls to anything in the phone book. By the way, for those of you who are listening who don't know what a phone book is, it's an actual book with phone numbers in it. But I went through the yellow pages, and I called Disney, I called Filmation, I called Hanna-Barbera, and I just started, researching how to get into this business.
Absolutely. And what was your fascination as a child? I believe there was a particular character that kind of drove you from a young age.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to be Porky Pig since I was 5, and that was my goal in life. And people ask me all the time, why Porky Pig? Why not Mickey Mouse? Why not Donald Duck? And I guess the simple answer is I could do it. I figured out there was a formula to the stutter, a comedic formula. And my tape recorder had a variable speed control, and I figured out that I'd say the majority of Mel Blanc's voices were sped up, and I would slow down the voice to hear his real voice and the real pace of the character. So I was able to tape old cartoons and really study them, and I just found Porky to be such a endearing, fun, and funny character. I didn't realize it at the time, but when Mel Blanc would do Porky or when I do Porky, while you're stuttering, you're thinking of a funny ad lib. Well, that's improv, and so I didn't realize I was an improvisational actor. I just knew I wanted to be this character. But as I got older and studied acting and studied improv, I realized that it's that aspect of acting that I really, really like with a character, which is the improv.
Absolutely. Improv can definitely be a fascinating field, that's for sure.
You bet. Oh, it's a necessary skill for any actor. I don't care what your thing is. I don't care if your thing is voiceover or Shakespeare. You've got to have solid improv skills because you got to get out of your head and make solid choices.
Absolutely, Bob. Good word. Bob, I wonder, how did you end up coming to know about Mel Blanc? Was it just, you watched the cartoons and saw his name, or how did you kind of come to have a fascination and understanding of who he was as a person?
You pretty much nailed it. In the cartoons, it said voice characterizations Mel Blanc, and it's an interesting term, voice characterizations. I don't think it was ever used again other than the classic Looney Tunes. And by the way, Mel Blanc didn't do every voice in the Looney Tunes. He just got the screen credit for it because he negotiated that. He asked for a raise, and they said no, and he said, well, how about sole screen credit? And they said, okay. So whether it was him or not, he got the screen credit. So, yeah, that was my first clue that there was one person doing that. And I can remember as a kid watching something on PBS. It was a retrospect on Jack Benny and Jack Benny's radio show, and they showed Mel Blanc. And I was like, oh, there's the guy. That's the man. And he was doing other voices other than the Looney Tunes. But I got to see, him working and him working physically, which was very, very helpful to see his facial expressions and his body language. So I pretty much, would scour the TV guide if I saw anything with Mel Blanc in it. These were the days before VCRs or DVRs, as they call them today. And I just put my tape recorder by the TV, and if Mel Blanc was on, I pushed record. I still have all those old tapes. That was my college. That was my research.
Well, that is definitely a piece of history that I'm sure you cherish, being able to hold on to those all these years.
Oh, sure, and I've digitized all of them, so, because tapes do disintegrate, so I've got tons and tons of digital files.
Absolutely. Well, I believe you were a pretty mischievous young man, and there was a story about you going to the studio one day, I believe, to actually see Mel.
Well, what happened was, first of all, I before I went to the studio, I called him because I just thought, hey, I just moved to L.A., I'm interested in being Porky Pig. I wasn't sure if anybody had offered him a chance to retire. I was more than happy to, and I just thought I was being very generous to offer that. So I looked in the phone book, and I couldn't find his name. And my dad informed me that we came from Cincinnati at the time, and Cincinnati had one phone book for the whole city. L.A. is huge, and there's a different phone book around every street corner. So my dad traveled the whole L.A. area from Malibu to Pasadena, and I had a stack of white page phone books, and I called every Mel or M Blanc in the books that I could find, and I tape recorded all of my attempts. Couldn't find him, and then I thought, well, maybe he's listed under his wife's name, and I knew his wife's name was Estelle, so I found E. Blanc in the Pacific Palisades, and that was his house, and got him on the phone and recorded the conversation. That conversation's on my website. It's illegal to record people without telling them, but I think I'm okay now. It's been almost 40 years. But during the course of the conversation, he mentioned the name of the studio he was working at that week. He didn't say the day or the time. He just said the name. So when I was finished talking to him, I called that studio pretending to be his assistant, and I said, hi, I'm calling to confirm Mr. Blank's appointment this week for Wednesday at 9. And the receptionist says, well, we've got him on the books for Thursday at 11. I said, yep, you're right. I'm looking at the wrong date in my calendar. I apologize. We'll see you on Thursday at 11. So I told my mom, I'm skipping school on Thursday, and we're going to go watch Mel Blanc work. And she said, cool. So when I got to the studio, I told the receptionist that we were guests of Mel Blanc, and she showed me what room he was in. And when I walked into his recording studio, I told his producer that we were friends of the receptionist, and she said we can come on in. And we sat down, and I got to watch him work, which was, just if you're a fan of anything, if you're a fan of baseball, it's like looking at your idol playing baseball. If you're a fan of rock music, it's like looking at Mick Jagger doing his thing. And I was watching Mel Blanc do Bugs Bunny and Tweety and Porky Pig. It was pretty darn incredible.
Yeah, that's a most fascinating story. I know that had to have been unbelievably fascinating.
Yeah, it's funny because at that point you're like, well, I could die today. This could be my last day, and it's okay. It's fine. I've accomplished what I needed to.
Absolutely. I would totally have felt the same way. I totally understand. That's amazing. Well, I know that with your boyhood dream becoming Porky Pig, how did you actually get that dream to become a reality?
Well, after meeting Mel Blanc, I realized, well, I'm only 14 and my voice hasn't changed, and he's still doing this, so I don't think this is right for me today. So I went back to the telephone and just started calling people to find out how to get into this business. And so I called Hanna-Barbera. They referred me to a guy named Bob Lloyd, who had a casting office called Voice Casters, and Bob Lloyd referred me to a guy named Dawes Butler. And Dawes Butler was almost every voice that Mel Blanc wasn't. He was Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear and Captain Crunch and Elroy Jetson. And I studied with Dawes off and on for about 10 years, and anybody else that offered voiceover classes. And eventually, a week out of high school, I got my first agent, got my first job, and I was pursuing the industry. I had day jobs, of course, but Mel Blanc passed away in 1989. I had a really good agent, and she was able to get me into Warner Brothers for when they were holding auditions for these characters. And so after many auditions and many callbacks, my first Porky Pig job was Tiny Toon Adventures in 1990.
And that is a most fascinating show as well. I know I grew up watching that show, and to be able to speak with you, it makes that so much more real for me. It's amazing.
Well, it was a really interesting venture because they hadn't really done anything with the classic Looney Tunes for years. And, with Steven Spielberg behind it, they're launching a new franchise, but they use the classic characters kind of, sort of, I think, this is just an opinion, but I think they use the classic characters as an anchor. So if the new Tiny Toon characters just didn't connect with the audiences, then I think what they were going to do is just make it more of like a Bugs Bunny show. But the Looney Tunes characters faded out, oh, God, after I think season 2, maybe season 3, but I didn't do that many after season 1 because the Tiny Toon characters and the Tiny Toon scripts were just so damn good. They didn't need Looney Tunes, so it held its own quite nicely.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Well, I know not only did you get to play your boyhood dream of Porky Pig, but in Space Jam, you also got to play both Tweety Bird and Marvin the Martian, which were just two of the other characters you got to play, as you've done many of the characters from Looney Tunes. And what was it like for getting to play those two roles as well?
Oh, it was fun. I mean, I had done Tweety for several years before Space Jam, but every time there's a major project, they do make us audition for it. So in 26 years, I've had to re-audition for Porky 4 times. So I had to audition for Space Jam along with millions of other people. Space Jam was a blast. It was a lot of fun. It was really hard to tell what kind of a movie it was going to be because you record the voices separately from the on-camera, and you record it. And when you do a movie, you do it out of order. You do it out of sync. So it's not like you do it from the very beginning of the script through the end. And when you work on a feature, they don't necessarily give you the entire script to absorb. We only got the script the days we were at the studio. So I really didn't know what the finished product was going to look like until I actually saw the movie. But what was cool about it, for most animated features, you work solo. Even if you have a scene with a scene partner, it's really hard to coordinate schedules. But for Space Jam, they had all of us in the room together as often as possible. Me and Dee Baker and Billy West. It was a really nice session. And that was Billy West's first time doing Bugs Bunny, and boy, was he good.
Absolutely. Well, Marvin the Martian was one of my absolute favorite characters as a kid growing up, and that was kind of one of the inspirations behind this show. For you, was that your first time doing Marvin?
I don't think that was my first time doing Marvin, no. But again, I did have to audition for it. And, like everything, characters get cut. The film goes too long. They do some rewrites. So there was a lot more of Marvin in the movie when I recorded. Actually, I did Speedy Gonzales in the movie, too, but he got cut entirely.
Oh, wow.
Oh, there was a funny bit where Speedy was running really fast on the basketball court, tying the shoelaces together on the Monstars so they would trip. And it was a really funny bit, but I think at the time they just didn't think Speedy was politically correct, so they just kind of decided not to keep him in the film.
I can understand that during the era when that came out and everything. That makes sense. But that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that with us, Bob.
Sure.
So I know with all my research I did, I found out that you were the voice of Luke Skywalker in a ton of different video games. How did all that come to be?
Oh, yeah, well, gosh, oh my goodness, a long time ago, like 20-something years ago. It all comes from an audition. My agent called me up and to audition for Luke Skywalker for LucasArts, and I told her, I really, really don't do a really good Mark Hamill. And so I passed. And she got a call from the producer at LucasArts who kind of insisted that I come to the audition. And I walked into the audition and I said, and his name is Dara O'Farrell. And I said, Dara, I don't do Mark Hamill. He said, don't do Mark Hamill, do Luke Skywalker. I went, oh, okay. Because if you find that the heart of the character, vocally, I guess I was in the right ballpark. But I was so worried about imitating Mark. And, Mark is Luke Skywalker. You can't replace that. So I was hesitant to go in there and try to mimic him and take anything away from him. But when they told me, don't do Mark, do the character, that was very helpful because there are traits to the character. There's pre-Jedi Luke, there's post-Jedi Luke. And I think that's what helped. And with Dara's direction, because he really did handhold me throughout that first audition and, quite frankly, throughout the game recordings, too. To the point where when I ended up doing Luke for the Robot Chicken specials, it was a breeze. I knew the character backwards and forwards. I've been doing it for years. And when you do anything for Robot Chicken, it's all parody, it's farce. So adding that layer to it was just fun.
Yeah, I've seen those episodes where you were on Robot Chicken, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Bob. I didn't know. That's so awesome.
Yeah, those were a blast. And what was really cool about those is George Lucas threw premiere parties for each one of those Star Wars specials at Skywalker Ranch. So the first time, I was there 3 times. The first time I was there, I was like, oh, this is like the coolest thing on the planet. And he gave us lightsabers as going away gifts, and we're all walking on our Southwest airplane flying home, and every one of the cast members and crew have lightsabers, which we kind of stuck out like we were coming from Comic-Con. It was really, really cool.
That's most fascinating. I had no clue that they actually had those parties. That had to be ultra fascinating.
It was surreal. And they gave tours, and I got to meet George, and it was very, very surreal.
So with your involvement with playing Luke Skywalker, would you say that's how you came to play Lama Su in Star Wars The Clone Wars?
Unrelated completely.
Totally, okay.
Yeah, unrelated completely. Totally different producers. Lama Su came by just from an audition. It all comes from an audition, I got the audition for the character, and I did my best, and they cast me. But I can tell you right now that the people that I worked with on Clone Wars, some of them might have known I had done Luke and other things, but you have to understand that the Clone Wars universe has nothing to do with the universe that Luke Skywalker's in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So totally different time frames, and there's so many people involved in these franchises. I really doubt anybody had a clue that I did Luke Skywalker.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us, because sometimes there are tie-ins, and other times, like you said, they're completely separate, even though they may be in that same realm of essence,
I'll tell you, it's funny. I was the voice of Disney Channel for about 5 years, and I was just the promo voice, just my own voice. Very first day I was working on the network, one of the producers said, I have a question. If the answer is no, don't worry about it. You still have a job, but are you at all comfortable doing character voices? And I said, well, I am, but why? And he said, well, from time to time we might have a promo that needs a character voice, and, you're our promo voice. I just didn't want to, if you can't do characters or it's not your thing. Well, the bottom line is people in the industry have no idea what else you do. So the people that do cartoons know me as cartoons. The people that do promos know me as promos. Same with narration. So you kind of have to reinvent yourself every time you work for somebody, especially if it's a genre that they don't know you from. And you have to check your ego at the door. The actor with the ego is going to be, don't you know who I am? Well, No, they don't. And don't assume that they do. I don't assume anybody knows anything I do. I mean, I've worked with people, oh my goodness, I just did something for a game for Warner Brothers with Looney Tunes. And the producer really had no idea I had done this character before. So he was playing me, a lot of clips to really nail the character and listen to it. And I played along. I just went, okay, I hear where you're going. I'm not going to be the, don't you know who I am? I've done this before. No, because then you're a jerk.
Yeah.
He's just doing his job and trying to do his job well. So I have had situations where that's happened, and like a week or so later, I get an email or a phone call apologizing. I had no idea you'd done this before. And I'm like, man, you know what? You're the producer. I'm not going to tell you how to do your job, and I appreciate the work, and maybe you have a different slant on the character that I'm not really privy to. So, you take a back seat and let them do their thing, and then you do your thing.
Well, it's great that you have that kind of mentality and attitude towards it because, people want to work with people who are easy to work with. And, you definitely seem to have a really positive and straightforward attitude about it. So,
nice goes a long way. I think you'll find, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of voice people, but I would venture to guess the majority of the people that you've talked to are very nice.
Oh, absolutely. Like, these have been the nicest people I've ever talked to doing these interviews for the show. I've never met a nicer group of people in my life. They are genuinely amazing.
It's true, and they're generous. I tell you, the best thing that happened to voiceover fans is social media, because if you go to Facebook or Twitter and you really want to start a conversation or make an introduction to Maurice LaMarche and Rob Paulson and Eric Bauza or myself or Tara Strong or Debbie Derryberry, you're going to get a response because, A, we appreciate the fans because we wouldn't have a career without them, but we also appreciate the next generation of voice talent who just wants to pick our brains and say, hey, how do you do it? So I don't know if you get that kind of generosity in the world of on-camera. I don't do on-camera, so I don't know. But the voiceover industry and the voiceover players, really cool people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And I have definitely felt that impact from the voice actors that I've spoken with. They've been unbelievably kind and just very generous with their time and their stories. And it's been it's been a blessing. It really has. So
yeah, it's very rare to find a jerk.
Well, as far as voiceover industry advice, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's looking at becoming the next generation voiceover artist, Bob?
Well, the first thing I'd say is study acting. Study acting, study improv, become the best actor you possibly can. I mean, there are many genres of voiceover. There's commercials, there's animation, there's games, there's promo, there's narration, there's audiobooks. What today's generation has that I didn't have is the internet. And all you got to do is go online. When I was a kid and I was studying voiceover, if I wanted to hear a talent agent's actors' demos, I would call the agent and lie and say, I'm a producer, would you send me some demos? And they would. But today you can go to a website called Voice Bank, and you can listen to every agent's demos, every agent from LA to Ireland. So if you live in Colorado, you can see and compare the Colorado agent's demos, or Texas, or LA, to compare it to New York or Orlando. That's huge. You can research what this business is all about without ever taking a class. This is what's demanded of you. This is how good you have to be. If you're not this good, don't attempt it. But the first thing I'm going to say is study acting. The other problem with the internet is that everything's available to people and people want it yesterday. So they'll go to websites like voice123voices.com and start putting themselves out there. Now that's fine for that level of voiceover, but if you really want to do cartoons, and I'm assuming you're asking me this about cartoons?
Yeah, I think more so towards, cartoons.
Yeah.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, animation is recorded and produced in Los Angeles. You got to be here. So let's say you're not ready to move to LA. Wherever you are in the country, there are acting classes. There are improv classes. Study. Become the world's greatest actor. And then save up your money. Live below your means. And then get to Los Angeles. Keep studying acting, but then study voiceover. And get to the point where you're demo ready. We've got resources online now like VO Buzz Weekly or Rob Paulson's Talkin' Tunes, where you can hear from the players, from the agents, from the casting directors, from the actors, what it's like, what's expected of you, what's needed to work in this industry. And eventually, you make a demo. And you've got to be a member of SAG-AFTRA because cartoons are union, and you need an agent. So, but all in good time. Everybody who today has an agent, has a union card, is working, there was a time in their life they weren't. So don't rush it. Take your time. Be ready when opportunity knocks. They hold auditions every day because they're always looking for new talent. But if you rush it, if you get in there before you're ready, you're closing more doors than you're going to open later.
Absolutely, Bob. Thank you for that very fascinating word. Could you just briefly tell us, what does it take for someone to actually become a member of or to join SAG-AFTRA?
Oh, that's very involved. Well, there are many ways to join SAG-AFTRA. One's called a Taft-Hartley, which is a technical term, which basically means that a producer sends a letter to the union who says, of all the people who I've checked out for this part, the person who's most qualified is non-union, which allows you to do that job union, and then you are eligible to join the union. And in fact, you can't do another union job until you do join the union. And the other way to join it is to do extra work, union extra work. If you do it 3 times and get 3 vouchers, you're eligible to join the union. It's expensive. It costs $3,000 to be an out-of-work actor and have a union card, but you can't get in LA, you can't get an agent, and you can't get a job without being union. So you don't have to be union for all voiceover. If you're living in Dayton, Ohio, or if you're living in, I think, are you in Dallas?
I'm a Texas boy, yes, sir.
There you go. Texas is a right-to-work state and quite possibly might be detrimental to join the union. On the other hand, where do you want your career to be? What do you want out of your career? You can't have it both ways. If you want to be a professional voiceover actor, that means you've got to be in the union. It means that you've got to play with the big boys. If you want to do amateur voiceover, and there's plenty of it, and depending on where you live, the cost of living is less than New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago. But if you really want to do cartoons, got to be here in LA. Unless you want to do anime. For some reason, Texas is the anime capital of the world. Tons of anime dubbing in Texas.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've had several friends that have done that, but thank you for giving us that insight into SAG-AFTRA, because that's, something that, I personally didn't know, but, I always want to share new information with my listeners as much as possible. So
yeah, I would also say go to SAG-AFTRA, go to their website, just surf around, tons of information on how to join. Boy, the internet is a blessed thing. There's just nothing but information, and the people. I get emails every day. Hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? And I pretty much respond to everybody. So if people have questions, they can always contact me too.
Absolutely, Bob. And speaking of being contacted, do you have a website, or what's the best way to reach out to you?
Oh, Lordy, yes, I got a website. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Bob Bergen. I've got 2 pages on Facebook. I have the fan page and the personal page. I would recommend joining the fan page because the personal page is at its limit. My email is porkysvoice@aol.com, and I answer every email myself. So, the nice thing about voiceover today is you work from your home studio. So I'm sitting in front of my computer all day long, and when I see an email, I tend to answer right away because I'm right there. So I'm pretty accessible.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I know there will probably be people that will reach out to you to, inquire and ask questions and everything else.
Cool.
So, Bob, do you have any current or up-and-coming projects that you can speak about in the voiceover industry?
Oh, let's see. I'm doing a show called Wabbit, which is a Looney Tunes production. Unfortunately, my episodes haven't aired yet. Porky comes in towards the last third of season 1, and I don't think they finished airing the first third, and he's all over season 2. We're in the middle of recording season 2, but they're not airing original episodes right now. That's Cartoon Network and Boomerang. This year I worked on Mr. Pickles, I worked on Trip Tank, Robot Chicken. I'm in The Secret Life of Pets right now. A movie called Trolls that comes out this fall. and then a whole handful of stuff that I can't talk about because they make us sign non-disclosure agreements.
Oh, I absolutely understand.
If you talk to me in 6 months, I can give you a handful more.
Hey, I would love to have you back on the show, do a follow-up.
Cool.
Well, Bob, what is your favorite cartoon character and why?
To do or just to enjoy?
That you enjoy and that you do.
All right, Porky to do, definitely.
Yeah.
My favorite cartoon character to watch would be the classic 1930s black and white Fleischer Popeye cartoons.
Okay. Those are excellent. Excellent.
Those are amazing. Those, yeah, when I was a kid, it was either Popeye or Porky for the voice. And I could do the oh my gosh Popeye voice, but I couldn't get the gravel part because I would do the gravel. It's like when they held auditions for Yosemite Sam at Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, I'm going to pass on this one because there will be blood on the page. and the same goes with Popeye. You know, that gravel, it kills my throat. But yeah, those Fleischer cartoons. And now I don't know if you know this, but cartoons are recorded first and then they animate to the soundtrack. But those black and white Fleischer cartoons were done just the opposite. Mae Questel and Jack Mercer would watch the cartoons and ad-lib all kinds of stuff. Those were Popeye's wonderful ad-libs without his mouth moving. And it was genius. It was just done. It was so before its time. But for me, that's what just nailed those characters is that wonderful free-form acting of those two actors and the stories, the animators. It was just brilliant. So, yeah, I love those black and white Fleischer Popeye cartoons.
Absolutely. That's most fascinating to hear. And it's a very unique something. Hopefully some of my listeners will look into because they aren't as familiar with it as you and I are. So
sadly, no. I mean, I've got, of course, the DVD, every single one of them. Boomerang used to air them. I'm not sure if they still do, but I would, you know what? Everything is on YouTube. People, you'll find it on YouTube.
Well, Bob, I have one final question for you today. The question is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
With the work I've done as Porky, and I hope to continue, I hope my legacy is that I was able to continue and uphold the integrity of the character. None of us that do Mel's voices, this is just my personal opinion, none of us sound a thing like Mel Blanc. There will never be another Mel Blanc. I mean, his genius wasn't just his voice, it was his heart, it was his brain, it was what he personally put to the characters, or brought to the characters. So my legacy with this character is that I hope I do my best to continue that, keep the integrity of the character. But, I just came from Comic-Con. When you go to these fan conventions, I'll be in Dragon Con in September. You go to these fan conventions and people come up to you and you touch their lives. And, for us, it's wonderful, fun work. It really is. I knock wood every day that I get to make a living doing what I do. But to know that you entertain, that you touch people, that they're influenced by how you make a living, it's very, very rewarding. So I mean, if you guys are going to fan conventions, do not hesitate to come up. I'll take a picture with you. I do ask that you bathe every day. Fan conventions can get kind of gamey, and latex does not breathe. But I truly do love meeting and hearing from people who like the work that we do.
Absolutely, Bob. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Sure.
Would you just close us out today? Just tell people who they're listening to and close us out as Porky Pig, if you would.
Absolutely. You are listening to Bob Bergen.
And you believe that Porky Pig, and you believe, that's all, folks.
Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. We'll see you next Friday with our next special guest, Michael Greco. Hey, are you ready to win some awesome prizes? Each week, one lucky listener will have the chance to become the winner of our giveaway. All you have to do is like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter. Enter hashtag plus the special word of the week for your chance to win. Today's special word of the week is hashtag Porky Pig.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.